You're listening to Power Athlete Radio, a podcast dedicated to empowering your performance every damn day. Join former NFL pro and Power Athlete founder John Welborn as he dissects the greatest minds in strength, conditioning, and more. So whether your goal is to be the hammer, destroy mediocrity, or simply move the dirt, you've come to the right place. Now with the warm-up done, let the gains begin.
So what was your background leading up to that? I mean, obviously we talked about, you going to Berkeley and as an organic chemistry major and looking for that, but like, what did that lead into? Like, was it high school? Were you doing stuff at Berkeley? Like how did that all lead in and then post that?
Yeah. I mean, it was a pretty, as I reflect back now that I'm older and just seeing like how kids just sort of follow in footsteps of what they know. Like I grew up in a household of a bunch of healthcare practitioners, a physician, a chief technologist in the ultrasound department. My brother was in medical school and residency when I was younger. And I love sports. Like I did all the sports, gravitated towards soccer and golf as my competitive outlets. But I think it was like midway through high school, wanted to go and lift weights to like build muscle. I just loved training. I loved training in all aspects back then, which was weird. Like I would be the kid that was at the weight room at 6 a.m. with the physics teacher lifting weights before high school classes started. I was the one that would be like, hey, I think it'd be a good idea to go run hill sprints over here. And people are like, are you crazy? Like, why would you do that? We don't, like, the coach didn't even make us. And I just really excelled in math sciences. And so when I got to Berkeley, I got an opportunity to play soccer. And I played 3 seasons. But it was like immediately a different experience for me because I went from top dog and then I was like 3rd string goalie. And so, and then playing behind like an All-American, and then he left after freshman year and a new All-American transferred. So it was like, okay, I'm just going to accept that this, part of my life, like being a player, is no longer my focus. And what do I still get out of this experience? Why do I still keep showing up and doing the hard things? And it was clear to me. I was like, I love the training of it. And I love that freshman year, they got us exposure to the weight room. And I'm working with the same, pretty much like the strength and conditioning coaches that are there to coach the football team, but they're like, like they give the junior strength and conditioning coach, like the soccer team, like, hey, you got to deal with these people. And they're pissed about it. And they're like grumpy that we're even in the weight room. But I was the one guy on the team that showed up and was like, no, I'm here. I want to learn, teach me how to get strong. And so, doing bodybuilding routines in high school turned into like, oh, there's such a thing as a power clean and a power snatch. And I can actually get really, really strong in college. And so like, I'm just on this medical school path because everyone's like, oh, you're going to be the best, Philly family doctor to come out of the family. You're going to just follow in your dad's footsteps. I'm just like, yeah, this makes sense. I'm good at this thing. But really just developing this huge passion for fitness and for, when you have like your degree program, it's like, here are your prerequisites. And then you get to pick from all these, courses. And I picked nutrition, physiology, every nutrition and every physiology course that was available at Berkeley that would give me credits towards my degree I took. While other people were taking, biochem and other courses, I'm like, I want human anatomy. I want physiology of development. I want exercise physiology. I want to, I'm taking everything that I can. And I'm piecing together an understanding of like, and this is again, like 2003, 2004. I'm like, oh, fitness and nutrition is medicine. It's not 21 years ago, that was not what people were talking about. There was medical school to go learn how to treat disease. And then there was exercise science, which was this very nuanced, department of looking at aerobic training, pretty much like predominantly. There was nobody like studying resistance training at the level that it's being studied today.
Sure.
And so, I don't know. I was just kind of like trying to figure out how to carve a path that would combine this legacy of my family, my passion for fitness and nutrition, how I was applying it to myself and getting really, exceptional results as an athlete, even though I wasn't like a star player. It was clear. I was like, I'm fitter than everybody on this team. Like I can run circles around these guys in the gym, in the weight room. And it's not valued by my coach, certainly. Like they want somebody who's about 3 inches taller than me and who has, a track record of playing in, US sanctioned games for like the international team. And like, I'm just not that guy. So I'll sit on the bench. I'll keep leveraging what I get as the perks of being a student athlete, priority enrollment. I'll get access to good strength and conditioning coaching. I'll get to keep playing this position, goalkeeper and goalkeeper training, which is probably as close to, a power sport as you can get. It's got nothing to do with being an aerobic athlete. And I love that. That's who I was. And so all of that was like, I graduated and was so burned out on studying and so burned out on MCATs and everything that I had done in those last, 18 months prior to graduating. I was like, I need to just pump the brakes. I need to take a year off, which turned into 2 years before I enroll in medical school. Cause I had been accepted and I deferred for a full year so that I could live life and just kind of get in touch with who I was before I went down another 8-year path of academics to get to be a somewhat of a functioning physician that had any knowledge and practical application skills. And then, so like in that time frame is when I was like, all right, I just learned so much in a short time at Berkeley around fitness. What else is there that's out there? And I started getting connected with Paul Chek, disciples. Then I started doing Polican stuff. And then someone's like, hey, you got to try this CrossFit thing. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like I will do anything. I'm road biking, 40, 50 miles a week. I'm doing lifting. I'm doing bodybuilding. I'm doing anything I can because it just lights me up. And I'm seeing these connections between human movement and how I'm fueling myself to not just like my own personal development and physical development, but like health outcomes for people. And that's when I like show up at a CrossFit, class. And it was like, okay, this is really cool. This really combines a lot of the things that I've been dabbling in, but it puts it together in a new way. And it's a community that is sharing a value system that I hold, and that they see this as health more so than anybody in the medical system. My interviews for medical school were almost comical when I think back at them, because I wrote a personal statement that was basically, I have a vision for becoming a physician who is going to have a center that will have physicians working alongside strength and conditioning coaches, nutritionists, and like basically like psychologists to like be like a one-stop shop for people to come and get really healthy, like, and prevent disease. And if I have to wear the hat of the physician so that I can operate this type of facility, then I'll go to medical school and do it. And I remember like having physicians that were like in their 50s and 60s talk to me during these interviews and like poke holes at it. And they're like, essentially the TLDR on that is like, you're crazy. That's never going to work. You're out of your mind. Like,
what year is this?
This is 2006. I think I was interviewing 2006, 2007.
So you were 20 years too soon. You were 20 years ahead.
Exactly, right? Yeah. And it's like, where was like Peter Attia and Gabrielle Lyon and these people that are like, getting huge platforms. Now they have huge platforms to just basically talk about what I was thinking would work, back 20 years ago. And I didn't have, there was no mentors. Like I got to the Ohio State University for medical school. And my first year I went in with like hope and curiosity and like excitement. And like within months, it was just like, that had just been squashed. And it was like, you're in a system. This is how we do it. This is how you become a good doctor. You basically learn how to treat disease. And I'm sitting in a library studying with my, peers who are leading the most unhealthy lifestyles. In the basement of the library is a Wendy's, and then you walk across the breezeway back to get to the other Jimmy John's, and you're walking through just a corridor of people smoking, chain smoking, and I'm like, what are we doing here? Like this doesn't feel right. And I just completely lost that passion, got super depressed, and I was like, this can't be my way.
This episode is sponsored by my dear friends, Kelly and Juliet Starrett from the Ready State. These two have been leading the charge in strength, mobility, and durability for decades, and now they've put it all together into the Starrett system. Now, here's why it's different. It's not just a training program. Yeah, they've got smart strength conditioning, mobility, and all the bells and whistles, but the system is the magic. They coach you on the practices you need to move the needle, levers like recovery, nutrition, and all of the things that you need to be durable for a long time. The best part is you're not on your own. They have live coaching calls with Kelly and Juliet, expert guests, and a killer community of people all chasing the same goals. So you get accountability, support, and direct access to two of the best in the business. If you want to get stronger, move better, and actually stick with the training because you've got a system behind you, head to starrettsystem.com to learn more. And for a limited time only, get $100 off with the code STARRETT, STARRETT. That website again is starrettsystem.com. Dude, that is hilarious because, I mean, that's, Dr. Kirk Parsley, good friend of ours. He actually just recently moved out to Arizona because they're setting up almost that exact clinic. I mean, Tom Incledon, who's out in Arizona, has Cosenta, which is on the exact same clinic, which is doctors, blood work, biologics, machines, everything. So I think what happened, and I'm sure you've seen this, it was better living through pharmacology and this idea of like, hey, let's just look at pathology as something that we can kind of fix with a one-to-one, like, oh, if you have this, we will give you this, right, instead of, really doing what you need to do, which is be proactive and not put yourself in this situation. Right. We have a cancer charity for Wade's Army. And for the last 12 years, I've looked at all this research. We've funded clinical trials. And I remember one of the last ones we got approached on was they wanted to, get 150 kids and bring them in. And they wanted to see if these two drugs that they thought would work together would help for this clinical trial, but they had multiple clinical trials for each of the drugs individually that had resulted in 100% death of these kids. But this one, they were going to combine them. And I remember them pitching me on this, and I'm like, so you have drugs that have not worked, and now, but you think combining them? They're like, well, we have to try to recoup some of our research costs. And I was like, yeah, I'm not funding that one. But yeah, medicine's in an interesting place. I think everybody realizes now that it's just not better to get into that washing machine cycle. If you can just stay yourself healthy and stay out of it, it's really the only thing you have hedging against, sickness and illness and mortality. Once you get into that, especially in the cancer thing, once they get you into it, they just keep spinning you in, cutting shit out. But one of the interesting ones that I kind of talked to him a little bit about was back in the 40s. There's a guy named Dr. Warburg who ended up winning a Nobel Prize for his work on the Warburg effect, which is mitochondrial dysfunction is the driver for cancer. And that cancer cells are just ones that no longer can, don't have the ATP to be able to produce energy. So they use a method to stay alive, which they start fermenting glutamine and sugar as for survival. And then those are cancer cells. And then all of a sudden that was they had the Warburg deal, and this was big in the 40s. And then all of a sudden they stopped funding him, defunded him, and it just went purely into pharmacology. And I always thought that if you look at all that original stuff, it was I know it sounds hokey now, sunlight, exercise, eating well, sleep. All these things we understand for mitochondrial density and for mitochondrial function. He felt where it was the biggest driver to fight off cancer. And that, and you're looking at that, you're so 80 years ago, we're back to where we started.
Right. Yeah. Because I can see how that happens. It's there's not a lot of money in sunlight and exercise.
Well, not for doctors. Because think about if you go to your doctor and you're completely healthy, he's like, high five, send you on your way.
Yeah.
It's for me, I don't even have, Doc Parsley's my doctor, and all we do is we do blood work twice a year. He looks at it and he's like, hey, I need you to take a little more fish oil. I need you to do this. And he's run all the Cleveland heart stuff, and we run all these tests, and he's like, good, you're not in the machine yet. And he's like, that's where, but
well, and now physicians are probably getting more on board with it because there's no shortage of business coming in, and it's just they're overwhelmed now. It's okay, now the medical system is leveraged too much. There's too many people coming into it. They want to have that high five to at least 10% of their patients, because that's going to alleviate their stress. And they're like, yeah, I still got 90% of people that are going to keep coming in and being part of this machine. So yeah, I think the balance is way too far, and there's a desire to shift it back.
Yeah, one of the big things we're seeing now, and I'm sure you've encountered this, is all the GLP-1s, and I get hit with questions on it all the time. And I don't know. I don't think we know what it looks like long term, but I know that the greatest driver of disease and illness we're seeing today is obesity. So any lever we can pull to make people less fat, whether it be functional bodybuilding, nutrition, whatever, or taking a shot once a week. I think we're at a point where the house is on fire. Small water glasses aren't going to knock it out. You're going to have to hit them with a big hose from across the street. So having some form of pharmaceutical intervention where you're offering somebody some GLP-1s starts to sound like a good thing. And I hear people all the time be like, oh, but what about the negative side effects? And I'm like, well, I mean, if you basically get rid of obesity, you lose about 88 to 90% of all cause mortality. And if you get in a hot sauna, an exercise, I think it was like 70 minutes a week of hot sauna, cumulative, you all of a sudden get like zero chance of, heart attack. And every man on this planet is either going to die of cancer or heart attack. It's like 95%. Other than that, dies of like some form of violent way. So, I mean, it's like if you can, I was just looking at cancer rates for an article that, for SI, which we have this site called The Everyday Athlete. I kind of push content like this, but as I was looking on something for, I think a study out of somewhere in Europe, but it was like 60 minutes a day of exercise, not only increases your chance of surviving cancer treatments by like 27%, but like, and then I was looking at it, and I think it's like 19.9 million cancer diagnoses happen each year just in the United States, which is, for 360 million people.
I mean, it's, coaching fitness for close to 20 years now. It's like, what is the biggest obstacle that people face? It's managing weight, managing, an overconsumption of energy and not moving enough. And, we've been pushing the move more, move better, lift weights for a long time and telling people to eat less. And that continues to be just like, I mean, the food industry and the way that calories are so ubiquitous and available in forms that were never really supposed to be, touching our brain chemistry. It's just it's almost felt like a losing battle. Like, how can we actually win this thing? And so, pharmacology coming in and, providing potentially solutions that can help mitigate like people's appetite and how much they're consuming, we need to like really pay attention to, long-term outcomes for people that maybe take these drugs. But I'm like, why be upset about it? Like, this is important that we get control of this, because we've been trying for a lot of ways. And this year and the last few years, you got people saying, well, it's actually this thing, and let's get focused on this. And let's just look past like 20, 30 years, like no focus on low fat or high fat, low carb, or, getting rid of these types of oils in place for these types of oils. Like, it's just generally not working for people across the board, as you can see with obesity rates. So it's like, if medicine and science can come in and help that, I see it as a huge positive and something we need to be really open-minded about.
Yeah, there was a pretty cool piece of research I looked at for GLP-1s where they took both fit people and obese people, and they fed them fat, like just purely fat. And the GLP-1 that they measured in the body was equal in terms of like it went out. It was like universal, like the amount it went up. Then they took those same obese people and they took the fit people and they gave them just nothing but carbohydrate. They managed the GLP-1. Obviously, the lean, fitter people, the GLP went through the roof, much higher than the fat. For the people that were obese, it didn't even crack. So like the people that were in good shape, that carried a lot of muscle in relation to body fat, like they ate and they were satiated. And like, regardless what they ate, they were satiated. The people that were obese, regardless what they ate, I mean, the fat, it was like a similar amount, but like even for the protein, it wasn't nearly. So they're just sense for ability to feel full. Cause I mean, that's really what the GLP-1 is. And they just,
and maybe that gives like hope to the idea that like, this is a tool to get your body to a place where you, and of course, when combined with proper resistance training and movement, like, okay, then we can get people to actually build muscle tissue and be at a healthy body composition, at which point they could maybe titrate these drugs down and not gain all the weight back like everyone assumes that people are going to do. It's like, well, when you're well muscled and you have this reservoir for energy to go to and be utilized, and you actually move on a regular basis, like, then perhaps you don't need these long term, and it is a tool to get you to that place.
Sure.
And why don't people just do that when they're obese? It's like, because when you're obese, it is a huge barrier to being physically active. Like it is so hard for people who are overweight to make, fitness a routine. But when you get someone to lose 30 pounds, what happens? They love working out.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yeah, working out's great. It's like, yeah, well, there's something here that's, more is worth the attention of everybody in the industry for sure.
Well, the other one, and we've seen this too when we've done diet challenges and worked with clients. We've seen people lose 20 or 30 pounds, but the problem is if they haven't spent a lifetime lifting weights and they don't really have, I think everybody has this idea that they carry a high amount of muscle and I just got to lose a little bit of fat. I'm going to look like I'm, ready to go win a bodybuilding show or step on, the cover of a magazine. And we've seen people strip 20 or 30 pounds and I'm like, ooh, they look worse. And this is something that we're seeing all too often is people are taking these drugs, but they're not eating a high protein diet. All they're doing is losing weight just because they've overconsumed them and they're, now all of a sudden they're nauseated by food. And then all of a sudden they're stripping away this weight and they just don't really have the muscle underneath. That's always a interesting one. Like, oh, I just need to move 5-10 pounds of fat. I'm like, actually you need to gain 5 pounds of muscle. It'd probably look a lot better. And that's where like I've, again, it's still early days and I've worked with clients that are on these drugs and I know that there's a responsible way to administer them and it's got to have a combination of like, yes, like eat less, you'll see health outcomes that are improved. Eat less with more protein, you'll see even more, health outcomes that are better and improved. Eat less, eat more protein and resistance train 2 to 3 times a week. It just starts to go up and up in terms of what people can potentially get out of this. So it's like, it's a combination therapeutic approach of, hey, if we need to use this in order to, mitigate over consumption of calories, that's great. We'll use it. And it doesn't mean that these other things are still not paramount, like it's so important. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's foundational, like lifting weights, training, you talked about building a big aerobic base. I mean, all these things which have, I laugh if you go back and you look at some of the early bodybuilding stuff, the idea that cardio kills your gains and cardio is going to somehow strip away all this muscle. And I actually found the exact opposite, that the more aerobically fit I was, the better I gained muscle and the easier it was for me to keep muscle, especially when we got into like caloric restriction and doing some diet stuff. And I'm sure you figured this out with the functional bodybuilding and I'm, going through your stuff, but how has kind of the marriage of the term, functional bodybuilding, which I thought was hilarious in that it's kind of an oxymoron in a lot of ways, in that, people from the CrossFit community and maybe like the functional fitness casted stones at the Globo gyms and bodybuilders. And my contention is if it helps you do better at what your intended outcome, it's functional by definition. So I love the oxymoron. So I want to get into that piece. Thanks.
Well, it was so organic. It was like, my CrossFit career ended in 2016, my, 6th games appearance. 2017, I sold my CrossFit gym and I was starting my own personal coaching business. And I was also just sort of rehabilitating from like my last season of competing, which was hard on my body. I mean, every year was hard on my body, but that last year was particularly hard. I had a good games run. And then I also shortly thereafter, like within a month of competing at the games, taking 12th place, went back and competed in my last season of Grid League, which was like, I don't know if you remember that sport, but it was like a Tony Budding spinoff type thing that he had created. And it was just like, it was rough. It was just so rough on the body. And that was the whole point. It was like, let's make something entertaining here.
I remember, Tony called me after he got handed his walking papers from CrossFit. And he called me and talked to me about the Grid League. And what was funny because, he calls me kind of like pitching me like, hey, you want to get involved? But Tony was such a what's the right word? Tortious prick when I dealt with him at CrossFit that I was like, why the fuck are you calling me? Like we've been nothing at odds. You've done nothing. I taught a seminar. I think I taught close to 300 seminars for CrossFit over the course of my life or over the time I worked with them. They filmed probably 100 of them. They put out one video.
Wow. Yeah. And he was in charge of media, right?
Yeah. And they came and filmed all this stuff. And like, part of the thing we were paying them, money, which was more like protection at the time. But like, hey, if you guys are coming and sending cameras and generating content, can I have access to it? No. And they never put out any videos. And the 1 or 2 videos they put out, one was not of me, was of 2 of my coaches teaching something completely awful to the point where I was like, fuck, they fucked that up. I wasn't there. So they only put videos out where I wasn't at the seminar from my assistant coaches, like one of them teaching a floor press, which wasn't good. And then another one giving a talk on something that we had I had recounted a conversation that Nicholas and Romanoff and I had about this idea of like big monkey versus small monkey, that like people like Rich Froning can handle a ton amount of volume. And there's certain people that like, and there's certain sports that pre-select for people that can handle volume. And then there's other ones that like, higher level athletes that can handle the volume just get shattered on the rocks, but yet still, and he gave examples of like Olympic athletes that train 3 days a week and won gold medals. And there was this idea that, you have to be a big monkey, but like, it was just a very cool conversation to kind of understand, because what I asked him, one of the guys I played college football with, benched, I want to say like 450 in high school and squatted like 700. He was super strong coming out of high school for a 17, 18-year-old kid. And then every single day that we were in college together, he got weaker. I don't think he benched 300 pounds by the time he was a senior. And like the coach, I don't know if you remember Todd Rice. I don't know if he was there when you were there. But he would like rip on him and be like, Doe, what the, and this guy's Kevin Doherty. He's like, Doe, why the fuck? He's like, what are you doing? How are you getting weaker every year? And Doe used to say the exact same thing, which is, it's too much. When I was in high school, I trained 3 days a week. I need a lot of recovery. It's too much. I'm always tired. And we just thought he was like, wow, this guy's being a pussy. Like, because I was like, oh, we train 6 days a week, multiple times a day, and like, rah, 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 rabble. And he said that. I always was like, it's a cop out. And then as I was having that conversation with Dr. Romanoff, it hit me like a lightning bolt. I was like, fucking Kevin Doherty. He said it. He guys fucking squatted 700 pounds and bench 450 in high school and couldn't bench 300 as a senior. Like, there are little monkeys. The problem is college football naturally selects for big monkeys. And that was kind of you just have to be able to handle the volume, just like, in CrossFit, you have to be able to handle volume. So
exactly. Yeah. That was my experience in CrossFit. It was like, who were the best athletes? They were the ones that could just endure the amount of volume that was required, whether they had, the right limb lengths and, good genetics, or that was just their essence. Rich was a perfect example. Fraser was another example. Yep. Miko was another example. Like all the guys that were champions, like Kalipa was an example of that to a certain degree. And I was really not. Like, I suffered through a number of years of just trying to, basically early years when I wasn't aerobically fit enough to handle the volume, I was constantly injured. And it was like, it was hit or miss whether I was going to even feel like I could get through the open or regionals or whatever. And fortunately, I leveraged being on a team for my first couple of years to make the games a number of times. And it wasn't until like I had put in 4 years of good training that I could even compete on the individual stage. And so, it was just, I was not like genetically the picture of like, this is what CrossFit success could look like. Well,
you're probably a little like a smaller monkey, just for the fact that I think when you look at like high level precision athletes, kind of like you were doing for soccer, where, as a goalie, you might have 10, 20 shots on goal. I mean, I would go watch my daughter's game, but I know men and women are much different. So, I mean, I'm pulling that number out of my ass, but like, let's say 10 or 20 shots on deal, and it's more like lateral step dive, like more like a power athlete, if anything.
Exactly.
And so you probably fit into that. Whereas the analogy I used to give at the CrossFit football seminar was, do you remember the old Simpsons when Homer becomes a professional boxer? And he just goes out there and stands with his hands at his side, and he lets the guy punch him in his face as many times. And then finally the guy's like so physically tired that like he just falls down, and then they give Homer the belt. That's my definition of the CrossFit Games. You have to be the Homer Simpson and take as many shots until everybody falls down, and then you're the last guy. And I was like, if you're willing to be the Homer Simpson and take those shots, you can win it. But the other thing too is a lot of the guys, and this is the interesting, and I'm sure you saw this segment as well, there was like a definite divide between athleticism and movement and the ability to suffer through it. Rich is kind of a rare individual in that he's actually both. I saw a clip. I think Rory sent me a clip of like Rich playing flag football. And he like rolled out to his left and basically right-handed, like threw back across his body. And I was like, oh, he's a fucking great athlete. Like I never saw that at the CrossFit Games because very few things they did like fostered and developed and like exposed him athletically, which usually involves somebody trying to fuck you up on something. Or like moving a ball. I remember you'll get a kick out of this. I was in Brazil years ago. We got invited to go to Brazil because they were trying to do this like activation of the NFL. Like they're doing it now. It just took them 20 plus years. And Tony Gonzalez, who was my teammate, was kind of the face of it. So we got to go to Brazil for a month. And we were in Rio and walking down the street, and we saw like this alleyway that had to be no more than 6 feet. And there was probably close to 100 kids playing soccer in this little like 6 foot alleyway that was pretty deep. And there was a little net, and they were playing like futsal, like with like a little tiny ball, and like kicking it off the walls, jumping off the walls. And it was probably the most insane thing I've ever seen. One, because you couldn't figure out what the game was, but all these kids knew it. And like their movement and what they were able to do in terms of like jumping off the walls and kicking the ball and heading it, and this was insane. And I was like, we saw that, and I remember thinking, this is why the Brazil is so good in soccer. These kids probably play this game and then go out to a real soccer field and are like, oh my God, look how much room I have. This is amazing.
Yeah.
And
well, so anyway, that brought me to the end of 2016. I finished up Grid League, and then I was about as broken as I had been athletic, like physically in, my entire time competing.
Let me ask you this on the grid, and this is the only time I'm ever going to interrupt you. The movements are ridiculous. Who was coming up with these movements? Were they just like randomly, like it was like, hey, we're going to do a toes to bar, chest to bar, muscle up, spin around, and you have to do like a triple flip. And like, I was like, who the fuck is coming up with this stuff? This stuff is ridiculous. Yeah. And then they asked you guys to do it.
That was our contention towards the end, was like, who's actually programming this? Like, who's thinking of this new stuff? Like, it's just people that thought it would look cool on camera. It wasn't, it had no regard for like the athletes by any means. And the pace of the play was, CrossFit was, for as much as people thought we were all, going fast for time, it was a slow sport. It was aerobic, and people had to be strong, and you were paced. Grid League was a true sprint every single time, max effort, everything. And that just, people ask me like, what was harder? I'm like, well, I'll tell you this, like my body has never felt as much pain as I felt in Grid League. In all of the CrossFit games and things I ever did, like a Grid League match was the most grueling physical thing I ever did. And I would lay in my bed for hours the night after a match in just throbbing pain, my hands, like all parts, no sleep. Like that never happened to me in CrossFit. So it definitely, like I remember my last matches, so they were like short on money, and they're like, okay, we're going to try and condense this entire season into a 4-week block. We're going to fly you all out to Provo, Utah. We're going to put all 8 teams in a hotel, and you guys are just going to compete every other day across the street in the convention center. And so it was like this super compacted thing where we had like 6 matches in like a 2.5 week time period. And, we went to the championship. We won the championship, which was all great, but it just meant that every day I was basically like, you got to just get your nervous system up to go do these things. And, I was a strong-ish athlete. I was not the strong guy. But in the last match, I remember having to do touch and go jerks at 285 for a set of like 8 on my frame, which was not meant to really do that. And I'm like, no wonder my like shoulder and my hips and my back and everything was just effed for months after that. So once I retired and I was like, okay, I have a career of being a health and fitness coach ahead of me. I'm not going to be competing anymore. How do I get myself back to feeling good? And I loved CrossFit. That was like my way of life, my way of training. But I also had years of prior experience in the weight room. And I'm like, I remember when I used to go to the gym, get a good pump, and I would feel great. I remember doing corrective exercises back with my, Paul Chek disciples, after college to kind of fix some stuff that I had, some back injuries that I had had. Okay, I'm going to start to include some of this in my training. And so it was 2017, and I was just, as I did for my entire CrossFit career, I posted pretty much every piece of training content that I ever had. I took video of myself every day before social media was big. I was taking videos, posting them on a blog, putting them on Facebook, and then Instagram comes out and I start posting some training content. And I'm doing, sessions where I'm doing stuff on the rings. I'm doing some conditioning circuits that look like CrossFit. I'm also doing rehab exercises, and I'm doing pump bicep curls and bodybuilding stuff. And, that audience that I had was all CrossFitters. They were all, some of them were competitive, and many of them were just enthusiastic CrossFitters that were suffering from a lot of the same things that I had gone through, which was they were just pushing their bodies so damn hard. They were feeling super broken, and they were like, how do I keep doing the thing that I love, but not feel so burnt out and beat up all the time? And they're like, oh, Marcus, you're doing something that looks different. Like, I respect you as a CrossFit athlete, but you're also incorporating some, looks like bodybuilding and some other stuff. And so my audience grew really rapidly, like followers, engagement. Marcus, what's this training you're doing? And it was like, I don't know, January 2017, the 18th, I don't know, some random day. And I did a workout, and I had this like sick bodybuilding pump, but I had also done like box jumps and some muscle ups in the same session.
Shirtless,
and I was like,
shirtless, of course.
Shirtless, obviously. I don't think I owned a shirt from 2013 to 2018.
Well, I'm a little disappointed. I see you with a shirt on. I was kind of hoping. Shirtless.
I did change the shirt so that it wasn't sweaty. The man bun's gone.
I know.
But I just said, yeah. They're like, what are you doing? I was like, I don't know, man. I got like a pump, and I did some I felt like I just did some functional bodybuilding, and it was like a kind of just a throwaway statement. And everyone's like, oh, you do functional bodybuilding. How do I do more functional bodybuilding? And so it was more like,
you're like, let me go get that URL.
Yeah, let me go check that. And then somebody had it, of course. So I was like emailing him. I'm like, hey, you haven't used this in like 6 years. Can I buy this off you? But basically, it was just a term that resonated with the people that were following me at the time. And it was like you said, like CrossFit community threw stones at the Globo Gym people, and the Globo Gym people were throwing stones at the CrossFit people. And I was like, all right, well, I think it's actually all pretty good. So let's just lean into it. And by leaning into it, it really, it was like, it separated me, but it also resonated with people that wanted it. And it didn't resonate with people that were like, dude, you're stupid. There's no such thing as functional bodybuilding. I'm like, okay, you're not my person. That's fine. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I'll stay in my lane. And, if I don't appeal to every single person on the internet, then that's pretty much how that works.
I programmed hammer curls on CrossFit Football, and it was like 200 emails I received in negative, like of people that were upset about it. So I started programming seated dumbbell power cleans. Yeah, was the deal. And if you watch it,
if you cycle those, that is a wicked bicep pump.
I was like, 15 reps, 45 pounds seated dumbbell power cleans. And I was like, don't turn the wrist, like, keep like a neutral fist. And I was watching the videos, and I was like, yes, I'm trolling these people. And but there was this. I feel like in those early days of CrossFit, I mean, there was this massive like us versus them. And I think Glassman did a great job of, if you want to create like something like a CrossFit-esque movement, you have to have like good guys versus bad guys. You have to like, hey, like the bad guys are on the other hill. We're going over that hill together to go get them. And I think what happened was when, CrossFit all of a sudden became the bad guy on the other side of the hill and people were attacking, like then it was like a Big Sugar. And he was really good about pivoting these different like nefarious plots against us. It was the NSCA and this and Glassman. Whether by design or just within his own paranoia, like was able to do some pretty amazing things to get people to say, hey, it's us versus them. You're on my team. These are the bad guys and we're going to get them. And then, obviously, part of the problem now with CrossFit, it's become very inclusive. It's it's for everybody, and there's no bad guy anymore, which then it just becomes, a joke on, South Park or, a punchline in different places. But I think what people forget is that the original methodology of taking this kind of mixed modal form of training, adding some form of, glycolytic work, aerobic work in this, hitting different energy systems is how athletes have been training for a long, long time. They just, like instead of triplets and couplets and that, we just call them supersets and giant sets. So I remember when I first came to CrossFit, I was like, oh, so you guys lift some weights, you do some conditioning, and you guys get a little pump with some of these movements. And they were like, no. And I'm like, no, that's exactly what it is. And they were like, no, that's not what we're doing.
No, it's work capacity.
Yeah, it's work
time modal domain.
Oh yeah. And I was like, oh yeah,
totally wrong.
It's a completely different type of science. It's a completely different type of, I was like, I get it. I get how you guys are couching it. My biggest problem with wasn't the training. It was actually the nutrition. And the way that they were, the age-old zone talk where it doesn't matter if you are eating beer, potato chips, and beef jerky, as long as you get it in the zone, you're eating healthy. And that was a huge problem for me because I actually did a bunch of nutrition science at Berkeley as well, and thought that was a direction I wanted to go. And then when I got to the NFL, I worked with a guy named Dr. Mauro De Pasquale, who wrote the anabolic diet, and everything he sent me in that book was juxtaposed to what I'd learned at Berkeley, where, saturated fat is evil. Carbs are the gold standard. You don't want to eat too much protein because it's going to fuck up your liver and kidneys. And then all of a sudden I read Mauro's work, which is like, if you want to have a really shitty androgen profile, eat a low fat diet. Carbs can be cycled, and protein is how you create body composition. And I remember reading that and being like, fuck, I totally fucked up this nutrition thing.
Dude, I remember being in a lecture with Dr. George Brooks, who was like, the Brooks pathway. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Right. So I'm like, and he's doing like part of the course, he's in his nutrition segment, which is not his lane as much as, mitochondrial metabolism, and lactic acid metabolism. But and at this point it's 2005, and like, I've been basically binging on T Nation for years at this point, and I'm listening to like people who understand nutrition on a real level.
Sure.
And I like pose this question because he's like talking about protein requirements for like athletes, and I'm just like, I still hold him in this really high regard, and I'm like, I take issue with that. Like, I'm like asking him, I'm like, you're talking about, like, he basically sat in front of me and some of my buddies who were aligned nutritionally around what we were, doing at the time as athletes, as bodybuilders, as people who cared about muscle. And he was basically like, he like looked me in the eyes, like, your kidneys are going to break if you keep doing what you're doing. And like, kind of made me like really afraid. And I was like, oh man, like, do I trust the guys on T Nation, or do I trust this guy who's got this like, pretty great career and resume behind him? And it was just like, I could sense that it was like, okay, there's a huge disconnect here. Like, what they're teaching, nutritional science in college is about 20 years behind. Yeah. And I don't think I'm not going to point my trust in that system anymore. I'm actually going to these, call them keyboard guys or whatever. Like, these people are living and breathing this every day, and they're staying more up on, what is actually working for people. And yeah, that was my experience with like thinking my kidneys are about to break.
I can't remember her name, but I had a professor that taught her nutrition stuff that was like kind of an older lady, white hair. And I remember one of the segments we did a little field trip deal where they had a machine. I don't know if you remember this. It was somewhere it was somewhere like, Tolman, kind of that like, bottom part of Berkeley. Yeah. They had this big machine, and I cannot remember the name, but I'll Google it. But they put food in it. They turned the machine on, and it destroyed all of the bacteria in the food so that the food became 100% shelf stable. So we did it with like milk, and like there was like a bunch of like kind of like fruit and different things. They put it in the machine, and it basically zapped it. And then we put it on the shelf, and the milk never spoiled. The oranges didn't spoil, like nothing went bad. And one of the parts of the class was that if we would just adopt this form of technology globally, that we would not have any problem with basically throwing away food because it would never go bad. And I was like, but aren't like the microbes, and isn't that like what makes us healthy? And she's like, no. Those are, and this was at the time when like everybody thought like if any form of microbe or any form of bacteria was a negative, not realizing that like, and I think the point I brought up was yeast infections that girls get, like if they, antibiotics, because I remember this was something that my girlfriend in the sorority, she's like, all these girls get sick, and then they end up, obviously it messes up the bacteria, the good versus bad. And so I asked her, I was like, well, what about like this? And she's like, next question. And now I think back on that and I was like, man, they destroyed all the bacteria in that food. And like, we know that like, you know, the bacteria and the balance within the gut and a lot of the dysfunction we're seeing is because people are so broken from, you know, not only, let's say, environmental this, I mean, you know, going through all COVID with everybody's washing their hands with all that, you know, what are the, like the Purell and different things that completely destroyed the microbiome. But I remember that one piece. And then you're going to laugh at this. I took a class, sidebar. You're going to laugh at this because you were a science major and I wasn't. But I took, my faculty advisor had me take this class. I think it was called, it was like an astrophysics class. And it was called Astrophysics 3. It was an introduction. And they gave you the 10 questions the very first day. And 3 of those questions were going to be on the midterm, 3 were going to be on the final. And you had the entire semester to work on those. And she's like, oh, it was called Astronomy 3. I'm sitting in there and it was astrophysics and was interstellar dust and how dust particles basically create these massive like clouds that drive all. I mean, like I was sitting in this class and I'm like, there's no fucking way I'm in this class. This is like astrophysics. Like these, like I'm totally out of my element. But I ended up staying in the class and like I ended up going to meeting the professor who wrote, do you remember the old supernova screensaver? Remember on Mac, it was like,
sure, yeah. Yeah.
He wrote that because he was the guy that researched black holes and supernovas. So he wrote that deal. So the way that they funded his research was that at Microsoft or whoever it was for the supernovas, like fucking the craziest story. But I used to go all the time to his office hours and ask him questions trying to get this thing done. So I went to every office hours, wrote out all the questions, showed it to him. I still got a B- in that class. That's how I realized. I was like, there's probably people like me that are good at writing and reading and like, you know, these kind of like,
I had a similar experience. Why is it that my academic advisor, who happened to be Derek Van Rienen, encouraged me to take this class first semester as a freshman? That was like his aunt who taught this like American Studies course. It was like I guess it was an upper division 101 or something like that. But he's like, oh, you should take it. It's super, you know, you'll do fine. It's relatively easy. And it was like basically a recap of like the film industry in 1939, which was like the year that, you know, Citizen Kane came out, like The Wizard of Oz, like all of these like, you know, politically driven narratives like in these. And I'm sitting there and like, everyone else is having a cruising time with this class. Like, oh, it's so easy. We just like listen to her lectures. We like write a couple essays, take these basic midterms. And I am just lost. I go to every office hour. I go to every single opportunity I have to engage with the instructor. And I work as hard as possible. And I sneak out like a B minus, B plus, but somewhere in there. Ends up being my only B I ever got at Cal. And it was like the hardest I worked. And I felt like I don't know a thing about what's happening here.
We should have switched. I could have done that for you. We should have switched, exactly. Because
you could have crushed.
Well, so oddly enough, there was a professor named Albert Johnson, and Albert Johnson was a kind of a political activist in the 60s and was kind of a pretty prominent figure. And he became a professor, and he used to teach a class called Afro 142 A and B, which was African American film study. But it was all like the 70s exploitation films, like, you know, Shaft and Dolomite and all these things. So you'd have to go watch these movies and then write papers on them. Like, this is so far up my alley as a rhetoric major. I'm like, what are the argument they're trying to make?
That makes me just like have anxiety and sweat thinking about it.
So I go in and like ace, right? And mind you, it was upper division, but I get like, not only did I get A's, I got A pluses on like both of these. So, I mean, now I got eight units of upper division A, which is like, fuck yes. You know, I'm at this point, I'm at like a 3.6. And I came back and I remember telling, I think it was, I can't remember her name. It was like Joe something was the faculty deal, which is also ironic that she ended up getting knocked up by one of the black players that like one of the black dudes I played with ended up like leaving. And then they had some secret romance going on. And then she ended up having this baby. That was a huge scandal. So I think she got fired. That's why Derek had to come in and take over.
I see.
But I told her, I was like, hey, dude, this class is great. Like, you should get more people in this. So she dumps a bunch of these people in it. And they changed the video time to like 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. So a bunch of the players couldn't go. So they were like kind of doing special screenings. Albert Johnson has a heart attack and dies during the mid part of the year. And all of his, his TAs come in. Like, this is now, I've had 2 professors that die on me. But a bunch of these players were like, had this special side deal where they were going to his office and watching the movies, during the time they could go, because it wasn't a practice. And those graduate assistants were like, we're not making any allowance. You guys got to show. And then I ended up getting all those dudes to fail. So I was in grad school at the time, and they were like, you told us this was a great class and now everybody's failing. And I was like, it was a great class. The dude died. And then all of a sudden, years later, it ends up happening to me when, my faculty advisor ends up passing away. It just, what's so interesting about that statement is places like Berkeley, especially for the professors that go there, go to grad school, get their doctorates, and then teach, never leave that place. Derek played soccer there and got his degree and his master's and teaches. I mean, people, and I always tell people, Berkeley's the type of place where if you go there and you kind of get into this system of it, people spend their entire lives in academia and spend their entire lives. For me as a rhetoric major, there was only, I think it was Harvard, Yale, and Berkeley were the only ones that gave PhDs in rhetoric. And so all the professors that I have were either from Harvard or Yale, and all the people at Harvard and Yale were from Berkeley, and they had this kind of big kind of roundabout where a guy would go teach there for 4 or 5 years and then come back. But there were people that never left Berkeley, and I guarantee there's people that I went to school with that are still there.
I bet. Wow.
Yeah. Did you grow up in California?
Yeah, I grew up here in Marin, actually. Oh. I'm from Marin. I basically haven't ever left. Obviously went to Berkeley, but that's just a 30-minute, car ride away. And then afterwards, I came back here, lived here with my parents, went to medical school in Ohio for a year. Which, funny, it's I went to Columbus, Ohio, when I was first starting to get the itch to do CrossFit. Now Columbus, Ohio is kind of
the Mecca,
a Mecca, right? Of CrossFit. At the time, there was one gym. It was called, CrossFit Gahanna. It was Rogue Fitness, but it was a 40-minute drive or 35-minute drive from, the medical center. And I just couldn't make the commute. I was I just can't do that. I got too much on my plate. So I was in the place that would have been the central, hub of CrossFit at a time where I was suffering through medical school and just needing community. And there wasn't a CrossFit gym in sight. And I was the only one in the, university weight room, running up the staircase to do laps around the indoor track and then running down the staircase to do squats in the squat rack, trying to put together some .com workout. It was wild.
As I was going through your stuff, one of the things that kept popping up was the term evidence-based. And that the term, let me pull up my notes, but you mentioned that not everything you coach is evidence-based, but that's kind of a foundational piece. The idea that the real experience that you're working with and what you're seeing, the evidence that you're creating within your training systems. How has that kind of morphed with not only the background that you have, not only playing sports, but also in medical school and kind of pulling it forward? I mean, it seems there were probably a lot of ideas that you had early on in the training sphere that, hey, these are things that we're doing that are working to me. But then all of a sudden there's a feeling of N is one where, this is working for me, but does it extrapolate out to the larger people? And now that you have, massive amount of subjects to test this training on, how has that kind of driven it?
Yeah, great. Well, I mean, the George Brooks example is kind of early years of me really kind of reframing well, what does evidence-based mean? He's teaching me science-based nutritional education information, but it's just not matching with my lived reality and also my my experience and the N equals 1 testing that I'm doing on myself. All right, I can't discredit and discount everything that I'm learning and what's there in the science. But maybe I just have to carve out this space for look, self-experimentation is what's driven a lot of people to come up with ideas that then they go test in a laboratory or in a clinical setting in a scientific with the scientific method, and until they even have this hypothesis that training glutes in this way might be more beneficial than this way, then they gather that through the experience of either working on themselves or working with their clients. And that was just that was reinforced also in like the CrossFit world. Like we broke a lot of beliefs around what human performance could look like, and how, you know, cardiorespiratory training and resistance training and power meets, like just combining so many different disciplines all within the same, you know, training methodology, if you could call it that, or sport, you know, could yield crazy outcomes that people just didn't ever think possible. And then rewrote kind of what this, you know, modern day narrative of like the hybrid athlete, like people wanting to be hybrid athletes. I'm like, you know, that's been going on a long time. And I think CrossFitters early days were some of the first hybrid athletes. And now it's like, you know, I want to be a bodybuilder and I want to run marathons kind of thing. But
where did this, like, not to cut you up, but like this hybrid athlete deal, like it kind of morphed out of nowhere, and I kind of associated with like Nick Bear, where, you know, he's kind of jacked and he runs a lot, which is kind of a weird deal because it's hard to carry a lot of muscle to do with the volume of running he's doing, unless, you know, he's taking performance enhancers, which is fine. Who cares about that shit? But like, it's kind of like one of these things where I remember there was a guy named Alex Vedita, who was like, back in the day, he was like a dude that I want to say he had like a 700-pound deadlift and was trying to like run marathons. And like that, I think was his first term, where it was like the dude was super strong and jacked, but could go. Yeah. And now it's kind of morphed into like, now people are, I see on Instagram, like, I'm a hybrid athlete.
Totally.
Like, so you go to a run club and lift weights.
Nick did an incredible job from a marketing standpoint to like promote that. And he's like the perfect case study. Dude's well-muscled bodybuilder physique, and then got really into running because he's got the background in like, you know, Army and or military service. And it's like he was also trying to build a brand and build a company, and they were servicing that, you know, community. And so it's like we get millions of people into being hybrid athletes, and we've got a lot of, you know, potential customers. And that group was primed and ready to grow because of CrossFit, to be honest. Like, you know, this Hyrox world is like, in many cases, from, you know, not being completely entrenched in the community of that and never having done one, it's a lot of people who are doing CrossFit and were like, yeah, I don't want to do CrossFit anymore. I want to do Hyrox. And from my also limited understanding, like Hyrox was kind of built out of, hey, we see this CrossFit competition thing going global, but like we want to create something that's a little bit more approachable for everybody to do. And so we'll just, you know, we'll take out all the skill stuff and we'll just make it CrossFit light, and we'll just get people to run a lot, because so many people are signing up for recreational running, marathons and 5Ks. Like, people love to do that. So this will be great. And they had a great formula. Yeah. And so all of it is, there's lots of motivation.
Do you know what Hyrox stands for?
No.
Hybrid Rockstar.
Is that real? Are you being serious?
No, I'm dead serious. I had to look it up because I was like, what is this Hyrox thing? And it's CrossFit Light, and they basically like, it's the same format. So it's like, it's not known. I guess it's known and knowable. So you show up, you know what it is. And I was like, what is this? Like, what does Hyrox stand for? And it's like Hybrid Rockstar. And I was like, that just took a lot of shine off of it for me. At that point, I was like,
they should definitely downplay that. They shouldn't talk about that too much.
Yeah, that was like,
yeah. I mean, it's like a CrossFitter was a hybrid athlete. We had, you know, look at the best CrossFitters that won, you know, champion after
Miko Salo.
Just massive aerobic athletes that were also strong and skillful, and that was it. And that's all we ended up training when we were, you know, in my later years. And I was still on the early stages of like the development of sport training for CrossFit. But I would do aerobic work, I would do strength work, and then I would do skill work. And
Shocker.
That was it. And then we would periodically mix it together to test whether we were getting better. Yeah. But that was like 90% of our training.
And you went to go do your sport. Training. And you went to go do your sport and saw if you got better at your sport. If the training was allowing you to be better.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Like, putting it together was the sport. It's like, okay, today we're doing CrossFit workouts. We're doing benchmarks. We're doing, you know, whatever we can pull out of the hopper. But that wasn't the training. That was the testing grounds for whether my 15 hours a week I was spending on the rower, the assault bike, the bike erg, the ski erg, the track was paying off. And so when you had hybrid athletes and you define success, and it was very much like your success in CrossFit as a hybrid athlete was based upon your ability to execute a lot of skills. And those skills were very good for certain types of bodies, not great for other bodies.
Sure.
Well, if you take out the skill work, then you have Hyrox, you have hybrid training. And now you open up the door to a lot of people having less friction and more success. And so that starts to be so appealing. And it's appealing to me. It's like, I don't actually like want to go snatch anymore. Like, it just doesn't feel great. I'm cool with not ever snatching again, or at least certainly not trying to, chase a 300-pound snatch anymore. But, if you open up hybrid athlete to this broader audience, we all loved it. We loved being aerobic and being strong. That is the epitome of being an athlete, in my opinion. It's like we all want to chase that. And so, it's finding ways for people to be able to do that and not bias one thing too much where they're just fooling themselves that they're really doing it all. Like these, group fitness models that claim to be strength and conditioning, but are really just boot camps where you're just doing aerobic work with lightweight. Sure. Okay, you're not getting strong. Let's be real. And then, people who are like, I do a ton of bodybuilding, but I also do like 30 minutes of stair climber. It's like, well, you have a huge margin of growth opportunity in your aerobic work, and it's not going to take away from your gains, right? So yeah, I mean, Nick Bare definitely gave it a huge platform, and now Hyrox is obviously pumping that even harder. And it's interesting though, because like people are like, hey, have you ever done a Hyrox? I'm like, yeah, it was called the CrossFit Games, and I did really good.
So you're going to get a laugh at this. The year that Miko Salo won the CrossFit Games, we were there. It was at Aromas. Yeah. And as he storms across, I think it was Savan or one of the guys puts a mic in his face and is like, you just won the CrossFit Games. Can you talk to me a little bit about your training? And he's like, yeah, I'm a firefighter from Finland, and we lift weights in the firehouse, and then I do trail running.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were like, and you do CrossFit? He's like, no, I lift weights and I do, like a really aggressive trail running. We do a lot of trail running and like lift weights and do a little bit of like gymnastics like gymnastics movements that I did when I was a kid, like we do within our fitness thing. And they were like, okay. And they like fucking literally cut it. And we were standing right there.
Let's go talk to
Chris Spieler. Yeah. They literally cut it. And I think they went and talked to him and were like, hey dude, like you just won the CrossFit Games. You got to say you do CrossFit. And he was probably like, oh, I get it. So then they like came back for another interview, but we were right there when the initial interview happened.
Oh my God.
I had not fucking laughed so hard. I've never seen the interview. And the only way I knew it happened was I saw it happen in real time.
That's hilarious.
And
I mean, and then I don't know what your history with running is. I know my history with running, but
sprinting.
It's not. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's not a discipline. It's certainly a distance that I have ever enjoyed or ever really I've not been skillful at it. I had to work a lot of hours to even get to just be in the ballpark of some of the other athletes. But I was always the last one in on Murph. Anytime there was a run workout at the CrossFit Games, I always finished in the bottom of the pack. People could say like, well, you just didn't train it hard enough. And I'm like, look, I put in hours and hours, and running that much at this body mass just didn't ever feel good. So people are like, you want to go do a Hyrox event? I'm like, I do, but can we just like take out the 10K and just like, do something like, I mean, it's definitely biased towards a certain type of person who really wants to run, and hybrid athlete has been, now it's like now synonymous with being a good distance runner and being strong. And that to me is a limitation of looking at that. It's like, no, you can be an aerobic athlete using lots of different disciplines and be strong. And, if running isn't your jam, then I got other ways to do it, for sure.
Yeah. I like to sprint. I like to run uphill, and then I do all my conditioning on the Echo bike. I mean, I have a very interesting relationship with the Echo bike, to the point where I use a little bit of Josh Bridges, like Pay the Man. I like kind of look and I'm like, well, I owe the Echo bike its fucking due. Like I feel like it's like an offering to the God. Like I have to give something every day. And some days it's just kind of 131 beats a minute for extended periods of time. Some days it's intervals, and I kind of have this thing I cycle through. But like all of a sudden I miss it one day, and I'm like, ah, shit, I got to go pay that motherfucker. And it's like it's a deal, just for the fact that so I do jiu-jitsu. And the guys that I roll with are some of like the top dudes in the world. And I'm very fortunate to work with those guys, both on the strength and conditioning side and then also on the mats. And there's nothing like not having an aerobic platform, like the ability to like kind of suffer through this when you're rolling with a bunch of like 25-year-old Brazilians that don't get fucking tired. And this is what they do. And I feel like when I go in there and I start sucking a little bit, I'm like, oh man, I got to do more. I need to do more. It just like we got a sauna at the house. So like I do that, I get in the sauna, I go back, and like anything I can to try to like keep myself fit enough to where if I'm stuck on the bottom and some dude's smothering me for 10 minutes, I can actually like, you know,
that's good motivation to keep you honest with your with your Echo bike. Yeah, it's kind of like an ice bath where it's like, I don't care how long you've done it. Every time you look at it, it just sucks. You're just like, damn it, I just got to get back.
I have zero emotion with the ice bath. I get in it and nothing. Like because I grew up in Southern California surfing in the, you know, on the water. And I just don't have any issue with cold water to the point where like, you know, my wife gets we'll get in the cold thing and she looks like she's about to go to war. I see her over there doing this breathing. She's like psyching herself up and doing this. And she's like, how are you so calm? And I'm like, I think it was because we got dipped in this thing when we were kids, man. We'd go surf for hours in the cold water. And so it just doesn't seem to bother me the same way. But the sauna, like that thing. So we do about 185 degrees and I try to get that like 3 or 4 nights a week for like 20 minutes. And that is by far the most painful thing for me, is to be able to sit in that like right. It's terrible.
Yeah, I'm opposite. I do the sauna and I'm just like, I guess recently, like
you're like, I could do this for an hour. Like, fuck.
I could literally just stay in here and just hang. But I mean, I used to be like, oh, I got to, hotter is better, but I guess it's turning out to not be better. It's like 185, 190 is good.
Yeah, I think it's 174 is the heat shock protein kind of deal that people give, but I feel like 185 is about, because what's funny is we tested all these different deals. Like I did like 165 and I could sit in there for a long time. 174, 175, I'm fine. 185, 190 feels like all of a sudden at 10 minutes, I start getting like a panic attack, like I'm going to die. And then we did like 200, 210. And then at that point, you're just like, I feel like I'm cooking, like I feel like I'm smoking a brisket. Like I feel like I'm on the Traeger. And but yeah, that 185 for me puts me in like a panic mode. But my wife gets in there and she could literally sit in there for like an hour and have a cocktail. And she's like, oh, this is totally great. I don't have any problem. And I'm like, and she's like looking at me, she's like, how are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm good with the cold. So I'm just wondering if that's like a body mass thing.
Hey, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. So like a big steak, like it's harder to freeze a big steak. All right, I got a couple more for you. If you could give a 20-year-old starting to train one piece of advice for long-term success, what would it be that goes beyond just like lift heavy and eat well? Or is it as simple as just lift heavy and eat well?
I mean, it's probably more to the 20-year-old. It's eat well because they're just game to go and lift heavy. I would probably say that, like, if you're 20 and you're super resilient and you can cheat things and get away with poor movement or poor mechanics or, not paying attention to your range of motion and your mobility, I would try and instill in them early on, like, you're going to want to do this for a long time. I promise you, if you get through your 20s and you have a base of fitness and your life really starts and you start building family, career, and your time to do this stuff starts to get a little bit constrained, like you're going to really want to have an amazing foundation of good quality movement and practices that help restore your body, not just beat you down. Because I think in my 20s, I just was, how do I beat myself down as much as possible? Because I'm going to recover. I'm going to, and I can, even if I'm not recovering, I can still just crush myself for, weeks and months at a time. And then I get a tweak and I have to take a couple weeks off, but then I'm right back at it. It's like trying to tell the person who doesn't need the extra mobility, the extra recovery, or like the practices that support this for a long time. It's trying to tell them, like, start that stuff now. Like, figure out how to not just use the hammer in your tool belt, but use a couple other tools so that when the 30s and 40s and 50s come around, you've got the right, you have at least developed some habits that will support this long term.
So how does that change for the 40-year-old? because I'm sure you kind of get a breath. I mean, I know you're, now a father, and fatherhood changes a lot of people, and marriage and all that other stuff. And you start getting into this balance of running a business and, approaching 40 and doing that. Obviously the prescription and what you're talking about for a 20-year-old is a little bit different. Somebody that all of a sudden at 40 years old, which is pretty wild. I get this on occasion, actually more than I care to say, but people that are 40 years old, I've never trained before. I've never lifted weights. And I'm like, never? What do you mean never? And then they ask me, I'm like, I don't know. I was like 14 years old and I wanted to lift weights, and I've been doing it every day since then. So now this is your forte into training and fitness and health and wellness. At 40, I usually comes off of the fact of I went to the doctor and I got visceral fat and I got all these health things, and the doctor told me I need to work out. So how does that prescription, because I'm sure and I don't know what what the market is, but I imagine you do get people coming to functional bodybuilding.
That's who we get, I mean,
that's your bread and butter.
Granted, and it's very different. It's, at that point, because they don't have a foundation of doing any of this stuff, I think the perception is, oh my gosh, this is going to be a monumental thing that I have to bring into my life that's going to take up so much time, and I already don't have time. I'm already not in great shape, and I don't have so it's really minimum effective dose for this group of people. Strip it down to the fundamentals of the basics of walking, 2 days of resistance training, and just, hey, instead of revamping your entire diet, let's just get you to focus on protein, eating protein at breakfast. Stop skipping breakfast thinking that you're intermittent fasting, because you're not. You're just absolutely, you're
just skipping breakfast.
You're just skipping breakfast, because you're not planning and you don't have, you don't have your shit in order, so to speak. But yeah, it's very much, when somebody doesn't have that. I mean, I love getting a person who's I did this in my 20s and 30s. I took 5 years off when I had my first kid, and I want to get back to it. That's a much easier path, and a much easier client to coach, because yes, they have constraints in their life now, and they have to learn a new system, how to do it again. But at least they have the history of I've been underweight before, under load. I know what it looks like to, eat the typical bodybuilder diet. They've done some of these things in the past, and they just need to have a different lens to look at modern day life, and they resonate with somebody who's in a similar position. I've got 2 kids, I'm 41, I run a business, I'm still making time for getting this stuff in. But yeah, the person who's just pretty much new, it's those are the people that need to hear it is not nearly as much as what you might think based upon watching fitness influencers who, promote things that are far out of reach for what your life has capacity for right now, and getting them to just be comfortable with the idea that a little bit is going to go a long way if you can just do it consistently. So let's just bite off a very small amount with you walking on a daily basis and tracking your steps and trying to hit, a target that's in many cases 3,000 to 5,000 steps more than what you do on average now. And then let's get you into the gym, doing a full body resistance training program. I don't care what it is, but just lift weights 2 days a week, right? Keep it super simple, and think about protein at each meal. And they're like, what is protein? Some almonds? And I'm like, 2 eggs? And I'm like, nope, it's this. And once they implement those 3 things, it's okay, what's next? Because I already feel, huge improvement from just that.
Man, that is, by far, when you think about the deepest pool of people, because you got this probably 20-year-old market that's obsessed with the Sam Suleks of the world, which is kind of scary now for the fact that the majority of stuff is drug questions. There's nothing that where it's hey man, and it's kind of interesting with that kind of Sam Sulek and Chris Bumstead market. Those guys started using drugs so early that they never really gave those guys look great. I'm not fucking casting any stones at them. They're bodybuilders, but I would love to see what they look like if they had trained naturally for a certain amount of time, and build more of a base for it. But I think that the market that you're working with in that 40 plus is, God, it's such a deep pool and it's so needed. One more, how has fatherhood shaped your views on discipline, consistency, and purpose? I know for me, the 2 most impactful things that I've noticed within my life in recent years was one, losing my dad when he passed away, and then obviously fathering children. And not that you need to be a man to father children and lose your father, but I felt like those two things happened in my life were very impactful in terms of viewing it, where I no longer had the ability to call up and ask my dad advice on things. And I like, you know, hey, like, this is what's going on, Dad, what do you think? And he was always there for me. And then all of a sudden realizing he's not there, now I'm that person for my kids. And then obviously I got 3 kids. I got, you know, my daughters are 13, my son's 9. So, you know, fathering children, and now all of a sudden kind of putting myself into that position, which, you know, you do for your family, but now you're also doing for the larger audience. Like, how is like fatherhood kind of changed you in such a way for now that you're mentoring people and bringing them on this journey?
Yeah. I mean, I think what it, you know, before kids, I kind of just consider that whole phase of my life as just one big 30+ year selfish pursuit. It was just like, it was all about me, right? It wasn't about anybody else. And then I'll be honest that probably the first 2 to 4 years of being a dad, I had kind of resentment. I was like, damn, like I can't make this all about me anymore. Like this is an obstacle to me living the life that I knew. And that was a hard, I mean, those were hard years for me. You know, I showed up in the best way I knew how, but it didn't really start to settle in until my kids were both in, you know, elementary school. And I was like, oh, you know what? Like, this isn't about me fitting fatherhood in around my life. It's about me fitting my life in around fatherhood. Like, I have a whole bunch of, you know, childhood demons that still I carry to this day. And a lot of them stem from relationships in my household that I had when I was young. And that's not to put any blame on anybody. My parents were great. They did the best that they could. And I have this opportunity now to create an environment and a life for these kids that's going to give them, you know, as good a potential at having great relationships, good emotional self-control, you know, be able to show up in a world that is probably going to be driven by robots. Like, how can I show up best for them? Well, the only way to do that is if I make my life centered around, you know, the fathering of them and the relationship to my wife, and secondarily, my own personal pursuits, right? Or whatever passions I have. And that's not to say like I just put myself second all the time, because I still, you know, I have foundational principles and things that I need to do that I know if I don't take the time to do this for my fitness or my mental health or my, you know, bonding and brotherhood with friends, that I'm not going to be a great dad. But it was like, yeah, I devoted, you know, 12 hours a day to myself in the past. Now I don't want to do that. And that helps me to just know, like, well, I know other fathers and other parents are feeling this at this time of life. Like, they're recognizing that probably their biggest calling is to show up as great parents. And how do I help guide them in a way that maybe I could have used some mentorship early, you know, in those early years of parenting, to be like, hey, it's not about you anymore, right? Like, and it's okay. Like, you can have a little bit of like, you know, grief for that loss in your life. And so, yeah, that's the biggest shift that's happened in the last probably 3 or 4 years.
Like, children are the most selfish beings on the planet, and they have to be, right? Like, because they have survival in this. And I think the interesting piece is, you know, for me too, same thing, like, very selfish. This is what I want to do. And all of a sudden you kind of switch this thing and you're like, it's not about me. It's about these selfish little fuckers. And I think about that. It's funny. My older brother has 2 kids. My nephew Luke is, you know, in college, and my niece is getting ready to go to college. She's a senior in high school. And my brother was like, he's in this like weird thing where he's like, man, like, you know, for the last 18 years, 20 years, like, everything's been about the kids and, you know, train and this and, you know, work and, like, you know, like baseball and focus. And he's like, I have so much free time. He's like, it's almost as if that, like, that selfishness we had before this, like, comes back and you're like, oh yeah, I just had to give it up. But the funny part, and I think I talked to Matt Vincent about this, if you're a selfish individual and you don't want to give that up, like, don't have kids. Like, don't feel obligated to it. Matt's like, I'm selfish. I want to travel. I want to do the things I want to do. I want to do all these things. And I'm like, well, then, like, don't feel the need. Like, these people, they're like, oh, everybody should have kids. I'm like, No, if you're a selfish person, don't have them. Because if you try to be really selfish with kids, they end up like everybody gets shortchanged. Like you lose out on like the effect, you lose out on the bond, like you lose out on these things. And man, it's definitely, fatherhood is definitely an interesting thing that I don't think anybody can prep you for. And like you said, like mentorship, but you know, even if somebody told you, would you really have taken their advice, or is it something you have to learn on your own?
Yeah. I think the irony of that is that if I knew what I know now before I had kids, I may not have had kids. I may have been like, you know what, that's going to be too much of a disruption.
Yeah.
And then we had the kids, and then I went through the pain of like grieving this old life that I had, to then wind up being like, whoa, thank God I did this. Like there's nothing more important and special that I get the chance to live out in this lifetime than this relationship that I have to them. So yeah, and that's probably where people are like, just have kids. Like, don't think you should have kids, because whether you feel like you're a selfish person or not, like at some point it is something. I remember Josh Bridges said this to me, like we were DMing like right after I had my first kid, and he was like, it's the coolest club that I've ever gotten to be a part of, that I didn't even know I wanted to be a part of. And I was like, huh. And then for a couple of years, I was like, I don't know, this is the coolest club. And then I was like, wait a minute, this is the coolest club.
Yeah.
I'm in a cool club now.
No, it's, I think that's why you should probably have kids when you're in your probably late teens, early 20s. Like I 100% buy into this, you know, like now we live in a time where like, you know, people want to be more established and they want to go to school and they want to feel like they have better resources to have kids. When in hindsight, I look at it, I'm like, I should have just, because most of my teammates, a lot of the guys I played with all had kids pretty early on. And it's pretty wild now to watch football and to see how many guys that I played with their dads. And, like Ray Lewis and this, and like all these guys I played with, John Runyon, I mean, like all their kids play. And they all had kids when they were in their early 20s, when they were, you know, this. And I mean, when they were playing in the NFL. And I think it was Runyon or one of the guys was like, when you're young, you don't really know that much. But as you get older, you kind of get into this, and like it's even more so. And I'm sure you've run into people that have had kids like later in life, 40s and 50s. Like you've lived your entire life in one way, you know, everything's super organized and clean and neat. And then all of a sudden, like I walk into my house some days and I'm like, it looked like a fucking bomb went off. Like the guys came over to train on Friday and they walked in and they were like, did you guys get robbed? And I'm like, no, my kids are just, I don't know, like they made a fucking mess today. And like, I'm trying to clean up because I'm super embarrassed about it. But you know, that's like, if you're in your like 2021, like you'd be like, get the fuck in, have a coffee. Like, whereas now you're a little bit bolder. So in hindsight, we probably should have had all the kids. So then all of a sudden the kids were out of the house by the time you were in your like, you know, late 30s, early 40s. And at that point you were like, great, does this mean I get to go back to college? Like, hey, I'm 38. I'm going to show up and buy your buddies drinks in this. So in hindsight, probably should have had kids earlier. And then you would have been probably less introspective and probably more just like, fuck it, let's just go out and fucking tear these kids up because, I do enjoy, or sorry, I will say this, and I'll be honest. I enjoyed my daughters right up until the point where they turned teenagers. And now they're turning 14. So they've been teenagers for 1 year. And I dropped them off at school today. And I make a joke every time. And today, as I roll down the window, I'm like, make good choices. And they both like look back at me with like this, like the most like guttural snarl, like just look on their face, like, ugh. And then they like both turned and stormed. I got twin girls, so I got double trouble. And I was like, rolled up the window and I was like, yes, I trolled them another day. Like, I wonder if they get older. And they were like, I wonder why my dad would say all that stuff, because he would laugh driving away. But I'm like, man, this teenagers thing is a real deal. Like, these girls are really surly.
Wow.
Like no sense of humor. Like no sense of humor. Nothing is funny. Like you don't know any of their inside jokes. Like I crack jokes and make fun of them constantly. And now it's just like, are you shaming us in this? And I'm like, oh my God. Like and my son thinks it's hilarious. And I'm like, just don't be like that. And he's like, I won't, Dad. I'm like, sure you will.
Man, well, I got some years and I'm holding on to these younger ages for sure.
Oh, I do this like, cause, on my iPhone, it like gives me like twice a day, I get like a different picture, kind of rotates to the lock screen. And most of them are their baby pictures. And so when I see them, I always like their big smiles and this and the whole thing. I snap and I send it to them as screen caps. And I'm like, oh my God, weren't you so sweet? What happened? And it's like, are you saying we're not sweet anymore? And I'm like, you guys said it, I did. You guys are teenagers. And all my buddies that have been through this is like, it's a rough, but then all of a sudden they turn like 17 and 18 and they become better. Even Kelly was telling me, he's like, there's a little rough years. And then they get a little bit older and it's a lot better. Just trust me, he's got to weather it. Just don't set him on fire.
Exactly. Just get them to those years. That's right.
Just get them to those years. So, dude, one, I'm super bummed that we haven't been connected or friends or got on a podcast or met in person. So it's always good to connect with other Cal guys and people that are in similar situations. So man, it was a pleasure having you on. And
thanks for reaching out. This really was, I didn't know what to expect out of it, but yeah, this was a great time. It's good to connect with you, John.
Yeah, man. If people want to get a hold of you or they're interested in more, I'm sure that's just easy to Google functional bodybuilding and Marcus Philly on social. I mean, you got a fucking gang of social media followers I was looking at. And I was like, holy shit, this functional bodybuilding must be something. This is amazing.
People must like it.
Yeah, people must like it. Dude, your content's killer though. I mean, you do an excellent job and it's consistent. It's good. It delivers. You're articulate in front of the camera, which is so rare to run in these days. And yeah, man, dude, thanks for coming on Power Athlete Radio.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This episode of Power Athlete Radio is powered by Train Heroic, the most immersive strength training app experience on the market. We've built an online training business by partnering with Train Heroic to deliver all of our world-class training programs like Jack Street, Hammer, Field Strong, and Grindstone. To learn which Power Athlete training program best suits your goals, head to powerathletehq.com/training. And if you're a coach looking to build a business with the best training tech in the business, head to trainheroic.com/powerathletehq. And now back to the show. Hey there, Power Athlete Nation. Big shout out to all the heavy hitters who stuck around till the final whistle. If you've been soaking in the knowledge bombs and epic tales we've been dropping for free, here's your chance to be a game changer. Swing by ko-fi.com/powerathlete and toss a few bucks our way to keep the podcast fueled and firing on all cylinders. That's ko-fi.com/powerathlete. Your support makes a difference. See ya.